Good morning, everybody. Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on supporting HSE compliance with risk assessment software. My name is Callum Grieves, and I'm the head of marketing here at Notify Technology. And today I'm joined by Jonny Ridley, our new business manager. Jonny has worked for Notify for nearly 5 years, has been in the health and safety industry for over 7 years. He's worked with hundreds of safety leaders like you guys and businesses as well to implement technology that can help ensure compliance without complexity. So what we're going to look at today in this session. So essentially we'll start with a bit about who Notify are and what drives us as a business. We'll then explore some of the real world challenges that we hear from safety leaders like you when it comes to staying compliant with the HSE, particularly when it comes to risk management and the risk assessment process. After that, Jonny will showcase how we can empower you to simplify your risk management process, how you can automate compliance tracking, and also how you can access that digital safety audit trail. So you're always prepared with the data you need to help you demonstrate compliance, both internally and externally. At the end of the session, we'll of course open up to the floor for any questions you may have. But of course, you can feel free to use the Q&A tab and ask any questions that you have throughout the session. And obviously, we'll pick those up at the end too. So again, thank you all for joining. And without further ado, let's get started. So for those of you who are new to Notify and not quite sure who we are and what we're all about, we're a health and safety software partner who essentially empowers safety leaders and businesses to proactively get ahead of risk. Our purpose is quite simple, really. We want to create a safer, healthier world of work for everybody. So unlike some other software vendors that are out there on the market, we're not just kind of building software for the sake of building software. We're actually partnering with safety leaders to help them drive real impact in their organizations. You know, in Notify, we're well aware that you guys are the safety experts, and obviously we are the technology experts. So what we want to do is really partner with you, really work with you to help drive our product roadmap and to ensure that the software that we do build is actually solving some of your biggest challenges. With our customizable software and our easy-to-use apps, obviously there you can see the impact our solutions have had with some of our existing customers, not only on just saving time and some of the admin stuff that you guys face on a day-to-day basis, but also generating data and insight and helping you reduce accidents in the workplace. So how do we do this? Obviously, you can see there we have a range of modules in Notify that are specifically designed and developed to help engage employees in safety. What we really want to do is empower your workforce and also the rest of your safety teams to capture accurate and consistent safety data. So you can use that insight and intelligence to make quicker, smarter safety decisions. For us, it's all about being proactive, staying compliant without complexity, and also ensuring that all employees in every organization work safe and go home safe. Obviously, during this webinar, we're really going to focus on the risk assessment side. But if you're interested in seeing how our other modules can work for you and your organization, you can feel free to email Jonny at the end of the session. Or we have options to kind of book a full demonstration or even try our software for yourself via the website. That's just a little bit about us and what we do here at Notify. But obviously today we're focused on how we can help you navigate compliance. So as a safety software partner, we speak with safety leaders like you on a daily basis. You know, we kind of understand the pressures you face, especially given there's like a myriad of ways in which health and safety legislation and regulations can be breached. Obviously, as you know yourselves, it's rare that the HSE or local authorities really just soak out the blue. It's kind of primarily investigations are primarily driven by events. But obviously, you know as well as we do, it's really important that you have your house in order so that when they do come knocking, you can demonstrate you've done everything possible to kind of manage and mitigate any risk. You'll see here on the slide just some of the most common challenges that we hear from safety leaders when it comes to ensuring compliance, especially when it relates to managing risk and standardizing that process internally, but also externally with contractors, visitors, and even the general public. So some of the common themes are like admin time, version control, visible evidence of an acknowledgement of claims. If there's an insurance claim, for example, kind of seeing that historic risk assessment trail. It's all really common challenges that we hear from your peers. So I guess, Jonny, over to you. How can we help you simplify your risk assessment process so businesses and safety teams can be assured that they're staying compliant?
Absolutely. Thank you, Callum. Morning, everyone. Appreciate everybody jumping on today. What I'm going to try and do before we get into the solution itself is really just try and bring some of these bullet points back to some of the real life challenges that I hear lots and lots of businesses across lots and lots of industries go through. So when we're saving time and ensuring the version control, what we hear from a lot of our customers is actually if we're doing these on sort of manual based systems, then actually we send these risk assessments out to different areas, different departments, and they grow arms and legs, and all of a sudden the versions are slightly different, and we're working off different spreadsheets almost. So actually, how do we make that so that we're all aligned as a business and the data we're collating is the same? We want to keep track and have an auditable trail around who's responsible for it, who signed it off. How do we make it so that it's really, really engaging with our end users? Because actually, what we've learned is people don't really want to read War and Peace anymore. So what are we seeing as a shift in our risk assessments and how that's transformed versus even a couple of years ago? There'll be some times for some questions at the end. If you do have questions as we run through, please utilize the Q&A tab. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in now and let's get started.
Thanks, Jonny.
Can we see that, Callum?
We can indeed, yes.
Perfect. Step one. Now, where we're starting here is the main point that we're trying to solutionize up front, really. So this is where we create our risk templates. Now, Notify have gone with an approach of a master-based template approach. And again, touched on the reason for that before. When you have big lots of departments, lots of different areas across the business, version control, keeping everything up to date and making sure everybody's working off the same copy becomes really, really difficult when we're working in sort of manual based processes. So what we do here is you guys as the safety leaders or the people responsible for carrying out the or creating the risk assessment will actually come in here and create a risk assessment template so that everyone is set in the way of working. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and we're going to go through here and create a new risk assessment template. So firstly, again, a little bit of customization at the top. So do we want to include our risk matrix? Do we want to include our initial risk scores? I know a lot of people will just work off the residual risk post controls, but actually giving you the opportunity to carry out your risk assessments and create and design them in a way that already feels familiar, but we're just digitalizing it for you. So let's say I'm going to toggle the initial risk score on. Then what we want to do is we want to enable e-signatures. Who's responsible for this? So actually, who signed this off? Where's in our audit trail? It makes it really, really simple. So I've got in it where I can enable e-signatures, any supporting text that may need to go alongside it. But actually, the most important part here, who's responsible for completing it and who's responsible for approving it. We can also pop in a date and timestamp and a geotag just to make sure from a compliance perspective, are people signing these off in a timely manner and where they were supposed to be signing this off. Now, when we get into the template itself, we thought we'd go with an example for today, and we're just going to do working from height as an example template today. Now, when we come into the descriptions and the safe system of work, this is the difference on what we've seen from the last few years from lots of customer feedback around where templates and where risk assessments are going. So yes, this is a free text space where you could type all of the information in, but as I alluded to at the top, really, people don't want to engage and people don't really want to read War and Peace anymore. And lots of safety leaders are struggling to engage their end users with big long documents. So what we can do here is we can insert links to videos, we can insert images. So if you want to make infographics and sort of bring the data to life, we make it much more visual, but actually we make it much more easier to engage with as for our end users. So I could put some text into here. We could also insert supporting images to go alongside it, and we can do exactly the same in our safe system of work as well. Now, if you're dealing with anything like substances, or you're doing any task-based or activity-based risk assessments where there's certain mandated PPE, again, this is where we can just toggle these on. So, for example, here I can come in, I can toggle on my substance properties if I need to, but also I can toggle on my PPE requirements. Now, what we'll notice here is in these are all still available as free text. We know there's going to be certain risk assessments we carry out where safety gloves is simply too vague of a description. So what we may want to do, we may actually want to change that, and you might have a specific serial number of a specific glove that we want to use. It may be a cut-proof glove with a serial number that we want to attach, and then again makes it really visual and really straightforward to engage with for the end user. Again, any emergency precautions if we wanted to add them, or further requirements, which are just free text spaces when we come to carrying out the risk assessment. We're going to come into adding the hazards, but just before I do that, I wanted to touch on how we can sort of make these a little bit more dynamic. And at the bottom here, you'll see we can add new sections. Now, what we're doing here is say we use the working from height example. I carry out a risk assessment today. To look outside the window, it's a pretty flat day, there's no wind forecast at all, but tomorrow there may be 30 mile an hour, 40 mile an hour gusts due. Actually, how do we make it so that our end users are able to have an area where they can address that? So for example, I may go into the environment, I may go and have we considered the changes in wind, and it's an area that allows us to talk a little bit more about, okay, what's happening, what's coming, and make it a little bit more dynamic in terms of a form. Now, there'll be lots of different ways that we all carry out our risk assessments and expectations of how much our end users have to do. But in our master templates, if we're sending this across a number of different areas, you may want to give a few hazards and controls as examples for your end users and then let them think for themselves. So actually, what we could do is add a hazard here. And you'll see it brings us to a page. What is the hazard? Now, I might say falls from height. Again, every time we see sort of drop down fields, you've got the ability to customize these and create your own drop downs here. So when I say who might be harmed, I might say, okay, well, it could be employees, it could be contractors, it could be new to the job workers, for example. And I say, how might they be harmed? Now, I'm not going to be morbid on a webinar on a Wednesday morning, so I am just going to put bruises for the sake of this session. But then we come into our initial risk score. So pre any control measures, what do we want and what do we think based on our judgment? Again, we're going to see our initial risk score key here. And later on in the session, I'm going to be able to show you how we can customize these and make it so the language is in a way that's comfortable for your end users to engage with. So let's say I'm going to put 9 in here. Then we get to creating our bank of control measures. So I might come into here and I might say, honest checks are complete. Save and create another. We might go PPE, relevant PPE worn. And let's say I put all of my control measures in. In this case, for this, we pop our residual risk in here. We save that down and it will simply add back to the document. So now we've given them an idea of how this works without giving them everything that they need to do, and they can still go and think for themselves. Again, we know that people, when they carry out a risk assessment, like to work in a bit more of a chronological based order of the way that things are going to be carried out. But if we know that our end users are maybe struggling to engage with a long risk assessment, what we may want to do, we may want to drag and drop our highest risk scores to the top. Make sure, if at least if they're going to engage with it, we're making sure they're engaging with the most important matters. So that's our template creation. Once we've published that and once we've saved that down, where we're going to come into is we're going to come into the carrying it out. So how do we make it really straightforward and how do we make it really simple for people to engage with? So again, if you wanted to be able to search and find any risk assessment from any time, you can see the different filtering options across the top. And important to note here, from a role and access-based permissions point of view, we're not going to allow anybody to go in and see certain risk assessments that they shouldn't have access to. Now, I'm going to come into here, new risk assessment, and we're just going to search for the working from height one that we've created. Now, when we come into this, what we want to do, we've got the title ready. When was it completed? Who was it reported by? And when's our next review date? We'll go 12 months time. Now, where's the location of where this took place? So I'm just going to pop it into my Amble site. But in order to engage people, what we don't want to do is have a single source of failure, which is often the case. There's often one name attached to a risk assessment, and it stands on that person to be responsible for the review date. Now, what we've got here is we've got the ability to add collaborators. So, for example, if both Callum and I had worked on this together, I can add Callum to this, and then both of us will be responsible for when the review dates come, when any actions come off the back of it, any next steps. So what we're trying to do here is remove that single source of failure. Again, we've come into our PPE requirements where it's been set up, and I can see, okay, my safety gloves area here, I can tick them as I'm working through it. And you can see my falling from height, we've got our different controls in, and this is the opportunity again where our end users and our people that are carrying out the risk assessment can come and add their own for their own areas. We've got the environment and the describing the weather to make sure that we've got it a little bit more dynamic. And then we've simply got our area here of who it was completed by. And I'll pop a signature in there with the date and timestamp and the geotag. And then I might pop Callum into there. And then we can get Callum to just have a little squiggle. And Callum pops that in there. Now we save that down. And you can see across the bottom, as soon as we've saved that, we can start engaging in terms of we've got an auditable trail to see when it was created and assigned. We can leave comments to one another. This is where we'll store our actions against this as well. But when we're talking about linking to method statements, linking risk assessments back to standard operating procedures, this is how we get our different modules to talk to one another. So we can link to records, but we can also link to different documentation so that when it comes to an export, everything's coming out together. So just going to export this here. And what we're going to go into is what does that look like when it comes out for us. So again, you could be able to customize this with your own headers, your logos, and making it look and say what you need it to say. We've got our who it was completed by and approved by here. But the key is when we come in, we can see our hazards and controls really quickly, really simply. But there'll be some people on the call who are thinking, there's going to be some people in our business who are going to cause a problem. They don't want to engage with it. They don't like engaging with tech. There's always a handful somewhere. So what we have the opportunity to do is, when we come to the safe system of work, what we also have is a manual sign-off sheet. So actually, if people don't want to engage with the tech, managers can go out, get their end users to sign off, and it can be re-uploaded against the risk assessment. So when we come in and we may have had one that's completed, say, and published out, what we want to be able to do is now we want people to go and read it. Now, how do we make it really simple and really easy to engage with? So there's my working from height. Jonny signed it off. When we come to the bottom here, what you'll be able to see is there's a sign to confirm. So what we want to do is we want to have as many people as possible be able to come in and sign off against the risk assessment. So you could be sending this to departmental heads, you could be sending this to regional heads, and they're getting their people to sign it off. But actually what we want to do, we want to try and get as many people as possible digitally signing against the fact that they've read and confirmed. So when it comes into here, we've got our read confirmation log, who signed against the risk assessment. Now, when it comes to configuring this and making sure that we have the ability to make sure that we're speaking the language that you and your people do across the business, we want to make sure that this isn't just a one-size-fits-all solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the company settings and be able to come in and edit. And we allow you to come and change, okay, if you want to change some of the text in the risk keys here, you want to change your matrices from 5x5 down to 4x4, 3x3, however you need to use this. But the important thing for us is we're not trying to come in and dictate the processes of how you work. We're just trying to make them much more efficient and make it so that the end users have a much easier way of engaging with a risk assessment. But really, from what I wanted to showcase for this session, Callum, happy to hand back over to you in terms of some key takeaways, some key learnings, some questions. But yep, thanks for all your time.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonny. Yeah, some great insight there into how people can digitally manage their risk assessments, right? There's lots of organizations out there we speak to again on a daily basis that are still managing this through paper and through Excel. Just a much more time efficient way, and also ensuring that compliance, that digital audit trail of people signing off on risk assessments is so important, especially when it comes to inspectors coming on site to see that someone's actually complied with the risk assessment as well. So no, that's perfect. So cool. So just a few quick takeaways from myself, guys, just before we move into questions. So really, when we speak to people, paper and Excel-based risk assessments, as I've said just there, are very time-consuming. They're also prone to errors, so that accuracy of data can also be compromised when you're using paper and Excel. Tracking compliance as well, that's one of the big headaches people have with paper. Finding it when there's an insurance claim, for example, or when there's like an incident on site. It's actually locating that risk assessment and then proving to regulators that risk assessment's actually being shared, read and understood by everyone who's on that site, whether it's employees or contractors. As Jonny kind of touched upon there, with Notify, you really can save a boatload of time. People have saved up to 30% on admin time by using this platform. You can also manage and mitigate risk a lot more effectively. But not only that, it's more that assurance. You've got that assurance, you've got that digital audit trail, that you've kind of done everything you can in your power to ensure that you and your business have effectively complied with the Health and Safety of Work Act. The kind of last key takeaway for me is, if you want to have a play with the system as well, we've got a whole load of resources on our website. We've got different helps, like hints and tips on how you can effectively manage your process, how you can improve your process. And again, we've got like self-guided tools and that sort of thing. So if you want to go on there and have a play around the system, by all means, feel free to do so. So with that, I'm just going to open that up to questions from the floor. Now, we did have a few come in as well just before the session started. So whilst people are thinking of questions, there's a couple here from the guys who couldn't attend. So Jonny, the first question I've got here is, can you link to different records within Notify? So say, for example, you've got an incident or you're completing an audit or a method statement, for example. Can you kind of link back to the risk assessment that was done at the time?
Absolutely. So this is exactly, I think I touched on it slightly without going into too much detail for this session. But absolutely, that's how we get the modules talking to each other. What is really important if there's an incident after a risk assessment's being conducted, to truly get our root cause and to truly get our understanding and understanding our why, we really have to link everything back together to really get a true picture of it. So we get them to link by code, and then all of a sudden when we pull things into exports, whether that be RAMs, whether that be SOPs or incidents, everything is always linked when we export, so we've got the full picture.
Cool. Sounds good. And the next one I've got here, Jonny, is around COSH. So I know you touched upon some of the substance properties and things like that we can track, but this question's around safety data sheets and just asking if we can actually upload those into the system as well.
Yes, absolutely. So across every risk assessment area, you should have seen when we went to carrying out the risk assessment, there was an attachment-based area. So again, not just for safety data sheets in the example of COSH, any supporting evidence really, Callum.
Cool. Perfect. And again, you showed a lot of customizability there. I mean, that's one of the big benefits of Notify, I guess, when you're managing your risk assessment process. Like we say, we want to tailor the process itself exactly to how you do it on your kind of paper and Excel sheets at the moment, just more on a digital platform. But this one's around the customization of the risk score. So can you deactivate the initial risk score and only record the residual risk, if that's something that's more kind of relevant to your business?
Yeah, so we should have seen that when we went through the creating of the template. We had the opportunity to include a risk matrix, but also to include our initial risk score. Now, we know lots of people just want to do the residual risk, so it's an optional, it's just a toggle when we create the template. So there may be certain risk assessments where we think it's essential, and there may be some where we don't want it. We're giving you the opportunity to do it however you like.
Perfect. And then the next one that's come in is how can we actually get people to sign the risk assessments? I mean, obviously that's a big challenge at the moment. I guess if you're using manual systems, that signing process is very difficult, right? You're relying on sending it via email and getting an email response back. Some people print them off and get them to contractors and sign them that way. So yeah, I guess how can we ensure that people are signing them?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways, and again, I made sure I stressed the ability when I went into the export there around. We know there will be people across the business who will make it really, really awkward, because they don't want to use tech, they're not comfortable with tech. But actually, there will just be people who are on different journeys with tech because there are different journeys through their career. So actually what we can do is we do have the digital sign off there where we can enable us to go in and manually digitally sign off. So we've got that stored in our read confirmation log, but also we do have that manual sign off sheet where we talked about the question there about uploading the safety data sheets, Callum. Again, we use that as supporting evidence. We've got the sign-off sheet, which we can simply reattach to the risk assessment with manual. So we're covering both bases because we know that simply across big businesses, not everyone is going to engage.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what we're all about, right? We just want to try and make safety easy for people, try and engage people into it. All of that kind of good stuff can just help improve your overall safety culture in the business. Cool. I guess this one's more from like a construction perspective. It's kind of how do you link risk assessments and method statements together for a more comprehensive RAMS offering. So obviously today we've kind of talked through risk assessments. Not only construction, obviously other industries use that as well. But yeah, obviously there's method statements available in Notify as well. So how does that kind of work hand in hand together?
Yeah, so this is why it was so essential that we were able to get the modules to talk to one another, because actually they are quite different in the way that we collate the data, because the method statement is more question based. There might be different types of questions and different bits of information that we're collating, whereas the risk assessment is a little bit more static and set in stone in terms of how we collate that. So actually what we do is once we've completed them both, we link them together via the code and they simply pull out together through the export. So then actually once we've exported that out, there's our method statement, there's our risk assessment, and we could even have our supporting SOPs to go alongside it.
Nice. Sounds good. I think there's just one more question here, Jonny, and I think it's around the actual implementation of the system. So so if somebody wanted to sort of transition over from a paper and Excel based system, what would the kind of process look like, and then how quickly could people get on board with using Notify and kind of rolled out across their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're big on the configuration side of things as we've shown today, Callum. So I guess firstly it depends on how complex the risk assessments are, how many historic risk assessments that you want to bring over into the platform. And we've got a fantastic onboarding and customer success team who will help in the building elements of that. But actually, what we find is a really nice part of that onboarding journey is learning how to build and design and get used to it. So actually, we find it as a really nice part of the implementation of the getting used to getting hands-on with the system. Again, we could have you onboarded if it was a very small business. We could have you onboarded extremely quickly, but we work off about 4 to 8 weeks.
Cool. Perfect. Sounds good. So yeah, so I guess if there's anyone on the call who's kind of thinking about it or kind of likes the look of using a digital risk assessment platform to help them with their compliance requirements, feel free to get in touch. I think that's it. That's all the questions from the audience. I'll kind of give you one last opportunity if there's anything else you want to flag to myself and Jonny from what you guys have seen from today. Obviously, if not, Jonny's contact details are there on the slide there, so feel free to get in touch with him with any questions that you might have. Again, like I said earlier on the call, if you guys want to have a full demonstration of other modules, so you can see how a full health and safety management system can be a benefit to your organization, in terms of engaging employees, really capturing that data and insight to help you get ahead of risk. Or you want to just try the system, we've got product tours on the website. We've got the option of like free trials and that sort of thing, so you can really have a play around and see if it can be a good fit. feel free to get in touch with us. Cool. So I don't think there's any more questions from the floor, Jonny. So I think we'll call it a day there. Appreciate we had this call in for an hour, guys. Obviously, we've really give you a whistle top tour there. Hopefully, it's been useful. You've kind of got some good insight on how a digital system could work in your business, and hopefully, we'll speak to you soon. But thanks again for joining.
Thanks all.